Hi, I'm Kat, and today I have for you a word in Romanian, and also we are carrying on the series on Jeffrey Dahmer, and this is part 2 and the last part of the series. Now, before you get started watching this part, I highly recommend you watch part 1 before watching this one, otherwise it might not make much sense or connection to you because I'm going to jump straight into the rest of the story today. So, the word in Romanian is necrophilia. 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 Well done, guys. You just said necrophilia, so basically it's very similar to Romanian. By 1991, the other residents of the Oxford apartment where Jeffrey Dahmer lived repeatedly complained to the building's manager, Sopa Princeville, of the foul smell coming from apartment 213 and the sounds of falling objects and the chainsaw. Sopa got in touch with Jeffrey regarding these complaints on several occasions. Jeffrey would say that the smell was being caused by his freezer breaking down, causing the contents inside to become spoiled. On other occasions, he told Sopa that the reason for the smell was that several of his tropical fish recently died and he would take care of the matter. On the afternoon of May 26, 1991, Jeffrey met a 14-year-old Lao teenage boy called Conorak Sintasom on Wisconsin Avenue. Unknown to Jeffrey, Conorak was the young brother of the boy he had molested in 1988. He approached the boy with an offer of money to accompany him to his apartment to pose for Polaroid pictures. According to Jeffrey, Conorak was initially reluctant to go, but he changed his mind. At the apartment, he posed for 2 pictures in his underwear before Jeffrey dragged him into unconsciousness and performed oral sex on him. Before Conorak fell unconscious, Jeffrey led him into the bedroom where the body of 31-year-old Tony Hughes, an aspiring model whom Jeffrey had killed 3 days earlier on May 24, 1991, lay naked on the floor. Tony was lured by Dahmer to his apartment on the promise of posing nude for photographs. As Tony Hughes was deaf, he and Dahmer communicated using handwritten notes. He was strangled and his body left on Dahmer's bedroom floor for 3 days before being dismembered, with Dahmer photographing the dismemberment process. His skull was retained and identified from dental records. According to Jeffrey, he believed that his other victim, Conorak, saw Tony's body, but he didn't really react, probably because of the effects of the sleeping pills. Jeffrey drilled a single narrow hole into the crown of Conorak's skull, the 14-year-old, through which he injected hydrochloric acid into the frontal lobe. Jeffrey then drank several beers while lying alongside Conorak before falling asleep. Then he left his apartment to drink at a bar and buy even more alcohol. In the early morning hours of May 27th, Jeffrey returned towards his apartment to discover Conorak sitting naked on the corner of 25th and State, talking in Lao language, with 3 distressed young women standing near him. Jeffrey approached the women and told them that Conorak was his friend and tried to lead him to his apartment by the arm. The 3 women stopped Jeffrey from doing that, explaining that they called 911. They were extremely concerned for this boy who clearly looked like he was younger than what Jeffrey has said. 2 Milwaukee police officers arrived at the scene, John Balzarak and Joseph Gabrish. They observed Jeffrey as being relaxed. He told officers that Conorak was his 19-year-old boyfriend and he drank too much following an argument between them, and he would usually behave this way when he was drunk. Jeffrey also said that his lover drank Jack Daniel's whiskey on that evening. The 3 women, needless to say, they were beyond frustrated, and when one of them tried to tell one of the officers that Conorak had blood on his testicles, that he was bleeding from the rectum, and that before the officers arrived, Conorak tried to struggle with Jeffrey when he was attempting to take him back upstairs, the police officer just told the woman to butt out and shut the hell up and not interfere. I need to point out here that the women who complained to the police officers, they were black women, and the police officers, and Jeffrey was white. I wanted to point this out because this plays a huge role in the way that this case was handled. Prior to this, the police officers, they saw no injuries beyond a scrape to Conorak's knee and believed that he was intoxicated. Shortly after the arrival of the Milwaukee police officers, 3 members of the Milwaukee Fire Department arrived at the scene. They also examined Conorak for injuries and gave the police officers a yellow blanket to cover him. One of the 3 fire department members did believe that Conorak needed treatment, but the police officers directed the fire department staff to leave. Shortly after, Officer Richard Poropkin arrived at the scene. He and the other officers escorted Jeffrey and Conorak back to Jeffrey's apartment. Inside his apartment, and in an effort to verify his claim that he and Conorak were lovers, Jeffrey showed the officers the 2 semi-nude Polaroid pictures he had taken of him the previous night. Even though John, one of the police officers, didn't smell anything unusual, the other police officer, Joseph, later stated that he noticed a strange smell, similar to excrement inside the apartment. And this smell actually came from the decomposing body of Tony Hughes. Jeffrey later stated that to investigate the smell, one of the officers just peeked his head around the bedroom but didn't really have a good look. Now, according to the Netflix documentary, although I was not able to find this out from anywhere else, it seemed that the police officers were kind of reluctant to give this apartment a lot of checking, because Jeffrey said that he was gay and they were uncomfortable, thinking that maybe they will catch some kind of a disease by being in an apartment of gay people. So the officers left, telling Jeffrey to take good care of Conorak. The incident was listed by the officers as a domestic dispute. Can you just believe it? You had 3 police officers inside that apartment where Tony's body was decomposing, and none of them checked properly the apartment. It's just unbelievable, because if they would have done that, they would find Tony's body, which was on the floor in the bedroom where they had a look at. They would even have saved Conorak, the 14-year-old, and they would have stopped the following murders. But because of this, Jeffrey was free, and of course he would become even more confident, right? After the 3 officers left the apartment, Jeffrey injected hydrochloric acid into Conorak's brain yet again. However, this time the injection was fatal. The following day, on May 28, Jeffrey took a day's leave from work to devote himself to the dismemberment of the bodies of both Conorak and Tony. He kept both of the skulls.
Tonight, Glenda Cleveland relives the frustration of being shut out by a police operator as she insisted the person being beaten was a child.
When I say what I have to say and I know it to be true, I don't feel that I have to constantly keep repeating myself. And I think that can be said for everyone.
Glenda Cleveland remembers the day Conorak died, remembers the police assurances that everything was okay. Did you start to doubt yourself?
I must admit I did. I did.
But do you feel they let that boy down that night?
Yes, they did. Yes. Yes, he was definitely let down. He was let down as low as he could get. And that was to his grave. He can't get much lower than that.
Grabbing at the young Laotian boy. It all happened about 12:30 in the morning of May 27th. That's when Tina Spively says she and her friend saw Conorak Simpson phone stumble and fall onto State Street. They ran up to him and noticed that he was bleeding from behind, and he appeared to be drugged at that time as well. That's allegedly when Jeffrey Dahmer grabbed at the boy, and Tina says she confronted him.
I was right up on him. I'm trying to threaten him to, let him go. We're like, we're going to bust you in your stuff. Turn him loose. He don't want to be with you. Leave him alone. And then my cousin's like, just get out of it. It's none of your business. I said, but still, he needs help. I said, look at him doing like they gave him some dope or something.
Spivey's friend called police. By the time they arrived, Dahmer had allegedly carried Simpson phone to this alley just off the 25th and State. But Spivey says the 2 officers quickly asked them to leave.
On June 30th, Jeffrey traveled to Chicago, where he attended the Chicago Pride Parade. There, he met a 20-year-old man named Matt Cleveland Turner at a bus station. Matt accepted Jeffrey's offer to travel to Milwaukee for a professional photo shoot. At the apartment, in the bathtub, Jeffrey drugged, strangled, and dismembered Matt and placed his head and the internal organs in separate plastic bags in the freezer, and his torso was placed in the 57-gallon drum that Dahmer purchased on July the 12th. Matt wasn't reported missing. 5 days later, on July the 5th, 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer lured 23-year-old Jeremiah Weinberger from a Chicago gay bar to his apartment on the promise of spending the weekend with him in Milwaukee. He drugged Jeremiah, drilled through his skull, and twice injected boiling water through it, sending him into a coma, from which he died, unfortunately, 2 days later on July the 7th. Jeffrey later recalled Jeremiah's death to be exceptional, as he was the only victim who died with his eyes open. Jeremiah's decapitated body was kept in the bathtub for a week before being dismantled. His torso was placed in the 57-gallon drum. On July 15, did I mention, and if I did, I'm gonna repeat that again. This 57-gallon drum was kept in Jeffrey's apartment. He kept the drum in his apartment, in his bedroom, and this drum was filled with all of these body remains. And also, when the police officers checked the whole apartment, including the bedroom, the drum was in that bedroom. Yes, just, let that sink in. The drum was in that bedroom. I mean, I think that it would be quite obvious to anyone going into that apartment, seeing a drum of that size would be quite unusual, right? Yet the police officers didn't really think much of it. If only one of them would have checked that drum, if only one of them would have looked properly into that bedroom, we wouldn't be talking about the following victims of Jeffrey Dahmer. On July 15th, Jeffrey encountered 24-year-old Oliver Joseph Lacey at the corner of 27th and Kilbourne. Oliver was a bodybuilding enthusiast. Oliver agreed to Jeffrey's ruse of posing nude for photographs and accompanied him to his apartment, where they engaged in some sexual activity before Jeffrey drugged him. Jeffrey intended to prolong the time he spent with Oliver while alive, but after unsuccessfully attempting to render him unconscious with chloroform, he phoned his workplace to request a day's absence, which was granted, although the next day Jeffrey was suspended. Oliver was drugged and strangled with a leather strap before being decapitated, with his head and heart being placed in the fridge. His skeleton was retained to adorn one side of the private shrine of skulls and skeletons Dahmer was in the process of creating when he was arrested 1 week later. After strangling Oliver, Jeffrey had sex with the corpse before killing him. He placed his head and heart in the fridge and his skeleton in the freezer. 4 days later, on 19th of July, Jeffrey received word that he was fired. After receiving the news, Jeffrey lured 25-year-old Joseph Arthur Braidhoft to his apartment. Joseph Arthur would be Dahmer's last victim. He was a father of 3 children from Minnesota who was looking for work in Milwaukee at the time of his murder. Joseph was strangled and left lying on Dahmer's bed, covered with a sheet, for 2 days. On 21st of July, Jeffrey removed the sheets to find that the head was covered in maggots. He decapitated the body, cleaned the head, and placed it in the fridge. He later acidified Joseph's torso along with those of the 2 other victims killed within the previous month. His torso was placed in the 57-gallon drum. On 22nd of July 1991, Jeffrey approached 3 men with an offer of $100 to accompany him to his apartment to pose for nude photos, drink beer, and just keep him company. One of the 3 men, 32-year-old Tracy Edwards, agreed to accompany him to his apartment. When he entered the apartment, Tracy noticed a foul odor and several boxes of hydrochloric acid on the floor, which Jeffrey claimed to use for cleaning bricks. After a brief conversation, Tracy responded to Jeffrey's request to turn his head and look at his tropical fish. Then Jeffrey placed a handcuff on Tracy's wrist. When Tracy asked what was happening, Jeffrey unsuccessfully tried to cuff his wrists together, then told him to go to the bedroom with him to pose for nude pictures. While they were in the bedroom, Tracy noticed nude male posters on the wall and the videotape of The Exorcist 3, which was playing. He also noticed a blue 57-gallon drum in the corner, which gave out a really strong smell. Jeffrey took out a knife and told Tracy that he intended to take nude pictures of him. Trying to please Jeffrey, Tracy unbuttoned his shirt, saying that he would allow him to do so if he would remove the handcuffs and just put the knife away. In response to this, Jeffrey simply turned his attention towards the TV, where The Exorcist 3 was playing. He was rocking back and forth and chanting something before turning his attention back to him. He placed his head on Tracy's chest, listened to his heartbeat, and, with a knife pressed against Tracy, told him that he intended to eat his heart. Tracy was continually trying to stop Jeffrey from hurting him. Obviously, by this point, I suppose that Tracy knew what Jeffrey was planning to do, seeing all that hydrochloric acid in the, in the living room, then also seeing the drum in his bedroom, then also smelling that, foul smell. Tracy kept telling Jeffrey that he was his friend and he's not going to run away. Tracy decided that in order to save himself, he was going to either jump from a window or run through the unlocked front door on any next available opportunity. When Tracy said that he needed to use the bathroom, he also asked if they could just sit with a beer in the living room where there was air conditioning. So they walked to the living room after Tracy finished in the bathroom. In the living room, Tracy waited until he noticed Jeffrey having a lapse of concentration before he asked to use the bathroom yet again. When he got up from the couch, he noticed that Jeffrey wasn't holding the handcuffs, and he then took the opportunity to punch Jeffrey in the face, knocking him off balance, and he just ran out of the front door. At 11:30 p.m. on July 22nd, Tracy flagged down two Milwaukee police officers, Robert Rout and Rolf Mueller, at the corner of North 25th Street. The officers saw Tracy with a handcuff attached to his wrist and asked him about that handcuff. Tracy said that the freak placed the handcuffs on him and asked if the police could just remove them. When the officers' handcuff keys didn't fit the brand of the handcuffs, Tracy agreed to accompany the officers back to the apartment where, according to Tracy, he had spent the previous 5 hours before managing to finally escape. When the officers and Tracy arrived at apartment 213, Jeffrey invited them inside, and he did admit to placing the handcuffs on Tracy, but he didn't say why he did it. At this point, Tracy also told the officers that Jeffrey threatened him with a large knife, and this happened in the bedroom. Without saying anything else, Jeffrey just told the officers that the key to the handcuffs was in his bedside dresser.
You solemnly swear all the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please be seated.
And how old are you, sir?
32.
32? And you are single?
Yes.
You were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on July the 22nd, 1991?
Yes.
And at or about that time, on that late afternoon, did you have occasion to see a person that you knew at that time or subsequently learned was a fellow by the name of Jeffrey Dahmer?
Yes.
And you know that Mr. Dahmer you're speaking about is the defendant in this case to my right, correct?
Yes.
Sir, would you indicate where Mr. Dahmer is seated in the courtroom?
It's over there.
Right in the middle between my two associates?
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Where did you know Mr. Dahmer by name prior to that date?
I've seen him a couple of times before then. I didn't know his name personally.
All right. Did you ever talk to him before that date?
Speaking to him, saying hello as he passed by. Yeah.
Just casual, friendly?
Casual, yeah, friendly.
Hellos.
Hellos, yeah.
Where was it that you saw him in the late afternoon, early morning hours of July the 22nd?
Grand Avenue Mall.
And that was in Milwaukee?
Correct.
Downtown on Wisconsin Avenue?
Wisconsin, correct.
Were you with somebody or were you alone?
A couple of her friends, yeah.
Okay, so the record is absolutely clear. You are not a homosexual, are you?
No, not at all.
Okay. So you were with a couple of your buddies, were you?
That's correct.
And what were you doing?
We was drinking beer, just talking, hanging out, you know.
About 6 o'clock at night, was this?
Yeah, about 6:15, whatever.
Did you have occasion then to see Mr. Dahmer?
Yeah, he approached us eventually and started talking to us, yeah.
Were you three black males?
Yeah, one white, two black male.
Okay. So you're friends?
Yeah, my best friend was white, yeah.
When he came up and started talking to you, what is it that Mr. Dahmer said to you?
He said he was just in the city from Chicago. He was taking care of her sick grandmother, I believe, in West Allis. Yeah.
And did he have any further conversation with you and your friends?
Yeah, he was just talking. He said he was a professional photographer. He usually pays people for pictures and stuff like that if anybody was interested in making money at that time.
To have to pose for pictures?
Yeah.
Did he describe the kind of pictures that you were going to be posing for if you chose to take him up on the offer?
He said nude.
Nude.
Right.
Now, after he said that to you, what did you and your friends do?
They were just talking, discussing it, you know, seeing what was going on, you know.
And what did you end up doing? Did you remain at Grand Avenue or did you go somewhere else?
We proceeded from there. He said he was going to buy all his guys beer, rum, and Coke, you know, watch videos or something like that.
Rum and Coke, did you say?
Yeah, we went to the liquor store on Wisconsin Avenue, 7th and Wisconsin Avenue.
So you walked from Grand Avenue down to 7th and Wisconsin?
Yeah, up, so to speak. Yeah,
At that
between
time-
5th and 6th, 7th, something like that. I'm not really sure.
The general area of 6th or
Right.
7th in Wisconsin.
Right.
Was it going to be the three of you and Mr. Dahmer were going to stay together, or was it agreed upon that one or others of you were going to go with Mr. Dahmer, or was there no agreement?
They were going to meet up with us eventually later on that evening.
Meet up with who?
Jeffrey at his apartment, but he gave them the wrong address at that time. To them, then we're going to go up the street. I was going to go home and change and everything at this time. So we proceeded. We caught a cab at the bus station, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what was your plan as you were in front of that liquor store after Mr. Dahmer came out with the liquor and you had been talking to your brother? What was your plan? What were you going to do? You say you were going to go home and change clothes?
Yeah, and eventually I was going to go over there, you know, and maybe check out what he was talking about making the money at that time.
So your interest was in making some money?
Right.
Did he tell you how much you would be paid if you did pose for him?
He said $100 for
You
a
had
shot.
no idea, did you, that this was for any homosexual
No,
conduct?
he didn't come across like that, and he didn't even act like it at that time.
Okay.
Me and Dahmer, my friends said they're going to go and change and call up the girls, and we'll meet up later on, you know. Yeah.
Was there an address given as to where you were going?
He gave them some address that wasn't correct, you know.
You later found that out?
Right, from my friends, yeah.
What happened then? Who else remained there when this was all transpired? Just you and Mr. Dahmer, or you, Mr. Dahmer, and others?
After it all had transpired, it was me and Mr. Dahmer in the cab, you know, leaving.
You met up at about 5:45, 6 o'clock, 6:15. What time is it now, at this time?
It's maybe 6:30 as we get to 26th in Wisconsin.
After he did that, did you go to his apartment?
Yeah.
What route?
Through the alleys, through the back way. We entered the back.
Was there any discussion as to why you were taking that route?
Said it was safer, people wouldn't bother us or whatever. Yeah, I just started working and the offer sounded good at that time.
Okay. Now, when you got to his apartment, how was he acting? Tell us about his demeanor. You know what I mean by that, Mr. Edwards?
Yes,
how was
I
he
understand.
acting?
Just like a normal, everyday person, you know, friendly, good conversationalist. He was talking about the military, things of that nature. Yeah.
Had you been in the military?
My father retired in the Air Force, so I've been to several different bases. I was born on an Army base in Fort Carson.
And that's the kind of thing you were talking to him
It's
about.
like a family thing, you know, so I know a lot about it.
Had he been drinking alcohol?
Yeah, I consumed some. He was drinking beer at the time when I first
Well,
met.
the time that you were like going to his apartment, was he intoxicated?
No.
Had he been drinking?
Yeah, I've been drinking a couple of beers.
How about you? Were you intoxicated?
No, not at all.
Had you had something to drink?
I sipped maybe a little beer, my friend's beer, that was it.
Tell us what happens when you get up to the apartment. Tell us what you observed, what your senses told you.
Okay, first of all, it seemed like a normal apartment. When we got inside, he turned off burglar alarms. I asked him why. First, it was a foul odor, okay?
Tell us about that. What kind of an odor
It was just like an odor. I didn't quite know what it was. You know, he told me a sewer pipe had broke and management would take care of it. You know?
And did you accept that?
Yes, because I worked around at construction companies before, and when pipes bust, sewer pipes bust, they smell, you know.
Okay.
So I brought that.
So you say your first thing you did was notice the odor. He opened the door to the apartment?
Yes,
And you walked in.
yes.
He turned off something. What did he turn off?
Alarms.
Did you ask him about that?
Yeah, and he said the part of the neighborhood he was in, he was protecting his property, things like that, cameras, VCRs, TVs, things of that nature.
Did you accept that?
Yes, I did.
After getting in the apartment, Can you generally describe the apartment, both the apartment that you saw then and the apartment that the other parts of the apartment you saw? Tell the jury what the apartment was like.
It was like normal, pretty decent apartment, had nice things in it. You know, it had certain boxes sitting on the front, muriatic acid boxes. I asked him about it. He said he cleaned bricks with those, you know, which you can use that type of acid to clean bricks, so I brought that also.
What did he tell you about those?
That he cleaned brick with the muriatic acid.
Okay. Now, was the apartment small, large, medium? Give us the size.
Kind of medium size, yeah.
All right. Now, when you went in there, you went in, as you entered, were you in the living room?
Yes.
And what was the living room? What did you see in there? The boxes you told us about?
The boxes, there's a couch, there's a fish tank there also, a black lamp. Yeah, there was a little table-like on the left side.
Could you see a refrigerator?
Yeah, I could see the refrigerator on my left.
Was it close to the living room?
Yeah, maybe 8 feet from the living room.
And so
we stayed in that room for a while.
And where did you sit, if you did?
Okay, at the end of the sofa like I am now, this is a sofa. I was at this end here, maybe a couple of feet from me.
Not close to you?
Maybe 2 feet.
You in fear of anything at that time?
Not at all.
Okay, and what did the two of you do?
Okay, he said we were still talking, chatting, you know. He asked me, was I interested in doing the photography? You know, I told him I was still contemplating, so therefore he offered me a beer and a rum and coke mixture at that point. And then I was just, I don't know, getting a little agitated maybe, you know, because of the smell and things. And then he threw my conversation off talking about the fish in the fish tank, you know.
Okay, when you start talking about the fish in the fish tank, do you bring that up or does he?
He does.
And what do you do when he does that?
I turn to the right, like the fish tank is here, I'm turning all the way over here.
You turn to your right to look at it?
To look at the fish tank, right.
And when that happens, what happens to you?
All of a sudden a handcuff and a knife is pulled on me. Yeah.
Handcuff is placed on your body? Where?
On my left wrist.
And you see a knife?
Yeah, the knife, yeah.
Now, at that moment, what do you do?
First I feel fear, then I ask him what's going on, you know. This is not necessary, you know, to pull a knife on me at that point.
Are you afraid?
Yes.
Do you have any reason to know why he did that?
None whatsoever.
Did you have any idea at that time it was going to happen?
No.
Tell me about his demeanor at that time when you looked and realized he had a knife and you in a cuff. You were only cuffed on one wrist?
One wrist, yeah.
What was happening to the other part of the handcuff?
Okay, he had it in his hand.
He was holding it?
Holding that in the wrist, yeah.
Where was the knife? In the other hand?
The knife was like he had here. The knife was in his hand. He had it on me like this. It was like a military knife, a machete of some type. Yeah, he had it lowered right up under my rib cage, you know.
Did you feel it? Touch
yeah,
it?
he had it on me. He had it against my body.
What happened? What was going through your mind the moment that happened when you realized you had a knife at your side and a handcuff on your hand? What did you think?
I think, like, you know, what's going on, you know? This guy is so nice, and all of a sudden, you know, it's like he's pulling knives and handcuffs and all on me, you know.
What'd you do? What'd you say to him?
I asked him what the problem was, you know, that it's not necessary to do this, you know.
What'd he say?
He told me at that point if I wouldn't do what he said, he would kill me, yeah.
Now, tell us about his demeanor at the time that you look at him and you say, what's going on? You don't have to do this. What happens to Mr. Dahmer? What's he like?
It's like not the same person that we met at Grand Avenue Mall.
How does he different?
His face structure seemed different, you know. His body structure is like it wasn't him anymore, you know. It's like it was a totally different guy there.
So he told you if you didn't do what he told you to do, he'd hurt you.
He'd hurt me.
What'd you do? What happened? Tell us what happened step by step as best you can remember.
And then all of a sudden he kind of calms down, you know. And then he said he has a key in the bedroom, so we proceed to the bedroom.
The key to the handcuffs?
Right.
So you believed he was going to take them off?
Yeah. At that point, I had to go along with this guy, you know. And then if I had to find out, so I walked back there with him. He kind of guides me back there, you know.
Guides you back with the cuff and the knife?
Yeah, right.
And you go into the bedroom?
Right.
What do you see in the bedroom?
A big, about 50, 60 gallon drum barrel, whatever.
Do you ever see a 50, 60 drum barrel in anybody's bedroom before?
Not at all.
Do you have any idea? Did you ask him what it was?
No, at that point I asked no questions at that time. You know.
Was there a bed in that room?
Yes.
How was the bed? Was it made, unmade? What did
It was unmade.
What did you see on the bed, if anything?
Something like a stain or whatever, yeah, on the bed.
What did you think it was?
At that point in time, I wasn't sure.
What did you do when you got in the bedroom as he's holding on to the cuff and the knife? What did you do?
Studied us talking, trying to be friends with him, you know.
Did you remain standing? Did you sit down?
He made me sit down at that point. We both sit on the bed.
Was it at the foot of the bed, side of the bed, head of the bed?
Maybe halfway between.
Did that room have a TV set in it?
Yes.
Was there anything going on the TV?
Yeah, the Exorcist movies was playing at that time.
There was an Exorcist movie on?
Yeah.
Do you know which one of them?
The name, I'm not sure. I think it's 3. I'm not sure which one. Right.
So there was a movie. Did you know it to be part of television or VCR?
VCR, normally that's not on regular television, so I thought it was VCR.
You knew there was a movie showing?
Right.
Did you see him put it on, or was it on?
No. When we first got into the apartment, he went through the back, to the back bedroom. Maybe he put it on then, I'm not sure.
Okay. And then what happened? You're both sitting on the bed?
Yes.
Are you still in handcuffs?
Yes.
Is he holding the handcuff?
Right.
Do you still have the knife?
Right.
Is it pointed at your side, as you've told us before?
Right.
You trying to be cool?
Very much so.
You're not fighting with him?
No.
What's your intention? What are you planning on doing?
Getting away. I was contemplating on at the point jumping out the window. Yep. I was basically talking with this person, trying to let him know I was his friend. Yeah.
As you were sitting there on the bed, when he had you by the handcuff and a knife at your side, at that time, which would have been maybe 7 o'clock?
Something like that.
What impression was made upon your mind by the conduct, action, manner, expression, and conversation that you observed of Mr. Dahmer?
His frame of mind is what you want to know, right? Okay, he acted, at times he would go through like different changes with me, you know.
Tell us about that.
One minute he's like nice, then he was telling he didn't want people to leave him or abandon him, things of this nature, you know. That at times he wasn't himself, and then at times he was like a nice guy, you know. He would come and go different times, you know, throughout the whole time. Then he would like sit, being quiet at times, watching a movie, wanting me to watch the movie, you know, and just doing little tanning sounds, you know.
Did you observe him watching the movie and how he would react to the movie?
Right, he would like just start rocking back and forth when he, you know, certain parts of the movie or whatever.
Can you mimic him? How it sounded?
It was like a slow slur, like some of that nature, some close like that, I'm not sure.
Did it keep on for a period of time?
Off and on throughout the ordeal.
Was there any parts of the movie that was going on that you saw that he said anything about?
It was like the part about the preacher that used to be a preacher that had got possessed, and that it would seem like he was like interested in that part. That part had his attention more than anything. You're like it was like he wanted to mimic it or be like that part, you know, being demonized or whatever in that nature. It was like he changed with it at times. Then he would get more aggressive, try to get me to handcuff myself, both hands, and he's told me it made him feel more dominant at that time.
Okay, did you and he move off of the bed at any time?
Yes, he wanted me to lay flat down, stomach down on the floor at that time.
Did you at any time go to the bathroom, use the washroom, prior to the time that he asked you to lay down on the floor?
No.
All right, tell us what happened how did that happen that he told you to lay down on the floor?
You know, he told me to lay down face down, put both of my hands behind my back, because he changed again at that point, like he got more aggressive at that time.
Okay, now, but tell us, did he still have the knife out?
Yes, he still had the knife with him.
And what did you do?
Okay, I kind of like laid on my sides. For some reason, I guess God told me not to lay flat down or let this person handcuff me, so I didn't.
So you were trying to stop that from happening, but you got down on the floor.
Right.
What did he do?
He kind of laid across me, put his head across my chest at that point.
And what was he doing with his head?
Pardon me?
What did it appear to you he was doing with his head What was he trying to do?
Like he was listening to my heart, because at a point he told me he was going to eat my heart at that point.
He said he was going to eat your heart?
Yes, that's correct.
Did he still have the knife?
Yeah.
Where was the knife pointed?
When I was on the floor, he had it pointed at my groin area at that time.
One knife?
He had several, and then he slipped one. I managed to slide one underneath the bed. And I guess during a point of time through an ordeal, he didn't know where the knife was, so I didn't know if he felt that was a threat or not.
So he still had a knife, you're on the floor. How long does he lay on top of you trying to hear your heart as you've described it?
Maybe a minute, minute and a half.
And then what did you do then?
I knew something was about to happen, so I suggested that I go to the bathroom. I had to use the bathroom at that time.
And what did he do?
He kind of guided me to the bathroom.
So when you say he guided, you still had hold of your handcuff?
Yes.
And you went to the bathroom?
Right.
Did you urinate?
Yeah.
Were you able to utilize your own zipper, or did he touch you at all?
Touched me in no way. Didn't attempt to look. He just held me in back. You know.
So in other words, he didn't try to look at what your penis looked like or anything?
Not at all.
So after urinating, did you think that you were going to be the victim of, did he ask to engage in any homosexual acts with you?
None whatsoever.
Okay, so now you leave the bathroom and what happens?
Okay, then we go back into the bedroom. You know. It was like different time spans. We were talking about him losing his job. Then he would come to the person that I was first with, you know. And then at certain points he would change. You know, at first he was telling me about how people didn't care for him and things of this nature. And I was trying to comfort him, letting him know that I was a friend, you know, that I wasn't going to try to run away from him or nothing like that.
You were being cool.
I guess God, you can say that, because I had no control. I don't know. You know, and then he would have moods of being just silent, you know, and I wouldn't say anything, try to provoke him or say the wrong thing. I would be silent with him.
Okay. So you just let him be alone. Was that movie on the whole time, a long time?
It was on a pretty good period of time, yeah. And when it went off, I couldn't tell you.
Did he continue to chant from time to time?
Yes, it happened several times throughout the ordeal.
Now, when he would watch the movie, did you notice when he would go into this thing that you told us where he would really become fixed on the movie screen? What was happening? How often would that happen?
Throughout the movie, maybe every 15 or 20 minutes, and then he would turn around and try to ask me to put both of my hands behind my back, and I wouldn't, you know, do it. I would talk to him. I'd tell him, you can trust me, you know, you don't have to do this, and that would calm him down a little bit.
Start conversation with you again.
Yeah, he was like you're gonna have to do this and that, you know. Then he told me at a point I was gonna have to kill him, or he was gonna have to kill me at one point.
Were you and he drinking during this time?
No.
So he wasn't running out, bringing you out and getting beers and coming back?
No, I would have been out the window at that point.
Sure.
If he would have.
Some people, when they have too much to drink, change their moods. Was that the kind of mood changes he was having, or a different kind of mood change?
I think this was like more of an inner mood change than an alcoholic mood change. So I suggested we sit on the couch. I had unbuttoned my shirt to try to make him feel more at ease. And then I just sat on the couch and he just started going out of himself again. You know?
Going out of himself?
Yeah, he was like paying me no attention at that time.
Like he wasn't there?
He started the chanting again, and it's like just sitting there, you know. And then I just, for some reason, I said, well, I need to go to the bathroom again, and he didn't follow me at that point. So I reached up, I got up, and then I hit him, and I ran out.
So you hit him?
Right.
Did you have any other belongings there?
Yeah, I have my bag right there at the end of the couch. I sit in exactly the same place I sit when I went in there.
So when you got up, he let go of your cuff to let you go to the bathroom again?
He just let me stay there. I was going to go for the window. At that point, he didn't even have the cuff. It's like I wasn't even there anymore.
And when you saw that, what'd you do?
Mm-hmm. I just seized the opportunity. I said, well, at least I'm going to die trying. I'm not just going to sit here, you know.
What'd you do, son?
I hit him, and I ran towards the door, and he was right there, tried to grab me, get me back in there.
And what happened?
Then I made it outside.
So he wasn't able to bring you back in?
Bring me back in there, no.
He tried?
He tried.
And as you left that apartment, as you got away from him, I'm going to ask you again, what impressions were made on your mind by the conduct of Jeffrey Dahmer, by the actions of Jeffrey Dahmer, by the manner, expressions, and conversations of Jeffrey Dahmer that you observed. Can you give us some words?
It's like I told the policeman that this freak, this crazy guy, was trying to hurt me. Yeah.
As police officer Mueller entered the bedroom, Jeffrey actually tried to stop him by saying that he will just take the key himself. But the second officer, I think that suspicious of something happening there, Rout, just told him to back off. In the bedroom, Officer Mueller noticed a large knife under the bed. He saw an open drawer which, on closer inspection, contained a lot of Polaroid pictures, many of which were of human bodies in various stages of development. The officer noticed the decor, which indicated that this had been taken in the same apartment in which the officers were standing. He walked into the living room to show them to his partner, saying, quote, "These are for real," end of quote. When Jeffrey saw that Officer Mueller was holding several of his Polaroids, he fought with the officers in an effort to resist arrest, but they quickly overpowered him, cuffed his hands behind his back, and called the second squad car for backup. At this point, Officer Mueller opened the fridge, bad idea, to reveal the freshly severed head of a black male on the bottom shelf. As he lay pinned on the floor beneath Officer Rout, Jeffrey turned his head towards the officers and said, "For what I did, I should be dead." A more thorough search of the apartment conducted by the Milwaukee Police's Criminal Investigation Bureau revealed a total of 4 severed heads in Jeffrey's kitchen. A total of 7 skulls, some painted, some bleached, were found in Jeffrey's bedroom and inside a closet. Investigators discovered collected blood drippings on a tray at the bottom of Jeffrey's fridge, plus 2 human hearts and a portion of arm muscle, each wrapped inside plastic bags on the shelves. In these freezers, investigators discovered an entire torso and a bag of human organs and flesh stuck to the ice at the bottom. Elsewhere, in apartment 213, investigators discovered 2 entire skeletons, a pair of severed hands, 2 severed and preserved penises, a mummified scalp, and in the 57-gallon drum, 3 further torsos dissolving in the acid solution. A total of 74 Polaroid pictures detailing the dismemberment of Jeffrey's victims were found. The chief medical examiner later stated, "It was more like dismantling someone's museum than an actual crime scene." Beginning in the early hours of July 23, 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer was questioned by Detective Patrick Kennedy about the murders committed and the evidence found at his apartment. Over the following 2 weeks, Detective Kennedy and later Detective Dennis Murphy conducted numerous interviews with Jeffrey Dahmer, which, when combined, totaled over 60 hours. Jeffrey waived his right to have a lawyer present throughout his interrogations, adding that he wished to confess it all. "As he had created this horror and it only makes sense, I do everything to put an end to it." He admitted to murdering 16 young men in Wisconsin since 1987, with one further victim, Stephen Hicks, killed in Ohio back in 1978. Most of Jeffrey's victims had been rendered unconscious before their murder, although some died as a result of having acid or boiling water injected into their brain. Almost all the murders that Jeffrey committed after moving into the Oxford apartments involved the ritual of posing the victims' bodies in suggestive positions, typically with the chest thrust outwards before the apartment. Jeffrey Dahmer admitted to engaging in necrophilia with several of his victims' bodies, including performing sexual acts with their internal organs as he their bodies in his bathtub. Having noticed that much of the blood pooled inside his victim's chest after death, Jeffrey first removed their internal organs, then suspended the torso so the blood drained in his bathtub before dicing any organs he didn't wish to keep and removing the flesh from the body. The bones that he wanted to dispose of were pulverized or acidified with Soilex, the detergent, and bleach solutions used to aid in the preservation of the skeletons and skulls he wanted to keep. Now remember that Lionel, Jeffrey's father, taught him all of this in his childhood when he was showing him how to preserve animals and how to bleach the bones and things like that. Jeffrey confessed to eating the hearts, livers, biceps, and portions of thighs of several victims he killed within the previous year, often tenderizing the flesh and organs before consuming them in meals flavored with various condiments. Describing the increase in his rate of killing in the 2 months before his arrest, Jeffrey said that he had been completely swept along with his compulsion to kill. When asked why he preserved a total of 7 skulls and the entire skeletons of 2 victims, Jeffrey said that he was in the process of constructing a private altar of victim skulls which he intended to display on the black table found in his living room and on which he photographed the bodies of many of his victims. This display of skulls was to be adorned at each side with the complete skeletons of Ernest Miller and Oliver Lacey. The 4 severed heads found in his kitchen were to be removed of all flesh and used in this altar, as was the skull of at least 1 future victim. Incense sticks were to be placed at each end of the black table, above which Jeffrey intended to place a large blue lamp with extending blue globe lights. The entire construction was to be placed before a window covered with a black opaque shower curtain, in front of which Jeffrey intended to sit in a black leather chair. When asked in a November 18, 1991 interview whom the altar was dedicated to, Jeffrey replied, quote, "Myself, it was a place where I could feel at home," end of quote. He further described his intended altar as a place for meditation, from where he believed he could draw a sense of power, adding, "If this, his arrest, had happened 6 months later, that's what they would have found," end of quote. On July 25, 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. By 22nd of August, he had been charged with a further 11 murders committed in Wisconsin. On September 14th, investigators in Ohio had uncovered hundreds of bone fragments in woodland behind the address in which Jeffrey had confessed to killing his first victim. The victim was formally identified by 2 molars and a vertebra with X-ray records to be that of Stephen Hicks. 3 days later, Jeffrey Dahmer was charged by authorities in Ohio with Stephen's murder. He was not charged with the attempted murder of Tracy Edwards nor with the murder of Stephen Tuomi. He was not charged with Tuomi's murder because the Milwaukee County District Attorney only brought charges where murder could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And Jeffrey had no memory of actually committing this particular murder, for which no physical evidence of the crime even existed. At a scheduled preliminary hearing on January 13, 1992, Jeffrey Dahmer pleaded guilty but insane to 15 counts of murder. His trial began on 30th of January 1992. He was tried in Milwaukee for the 15 counts of first-degree murder before Judge Lawrence Graham. By pleading guilty on January 13 to the charges brought against him, he waived his rights to an initial trial to establish guilt as defined in Wisconsin law. Attorneys at his trial debated whether he suffered from either a mental or a personality disorder. The prosecution claimed that any disorders didn't deprive Jeffrey Dahmer of the ability to appreciate the criminality of his conduct or to deprive him of the ability to resist his impulses. The defense argued that Jeffrey suffered from a mental disease and was driven by obsessions and impulses that he was unable to control. Defense experts argued that Jeffrey was insane due to his necrophilic drive, his compulsion to have sexual encounters with corpses. Defense expert Dr. Fred Berlin testified that Jeffrey Dahmer was unable to conform his conduct at the time that he committed the crimes due to his paraphilia, or more specifically necrophilia. Dr. Judith Becker, a professor of psychiatry and psychology, was the second expert witness for the defense. She diagnosed Jeffrey Dahmer as a necrophiliac, although she added that he informed her he preferred comatose sexual partners to deceased ones 75% of the time. The final defense expert to testify, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Carl Wallstrom, diagnosed Jeffrey Dahmer with necrophilia, borderline personality disorder, schizotypical personality disorder, alcohol dependence, and a psychotic disorder. On February the 8th, Dr. Fred Fosdell testified on behalf of the prosecution. He testified to his belief that Jeffrey Dahmer was without mental disease or defect at the time he committed the murders. He described him as a calculating and cunning individual, able to differentiate between right and wrong, with the ability to control his actions, and whose lust overpowered his morals. Although Dr. Fosdal did state his belief that Jeffrey Dahmer was a paraphiliac, his conclusion was that he was not a sadist. The second and final witness to appear for the prosecution, forensic psychiatrist Park Dietz, began his testimony on 12th of February. He testified that he didn't believe Jeffrey Dahmer had any form of mental disease or defect at the time that he committed the crimes, stating that Dahmer went to great lengths to be alone with his victim and to have no witnesses. He explained that there was ample evidence he prepared in advance for each murder, therefore his crimes were not impulsive. Although Park Dietz did concede any acquisition of a paraphilia was not a matter of personal choice, he stated his belief that Jeffrey's habit of becoming intoxicated prior to committing each of the murders was significant. If he had an impulse to kill or a compulsion to kill, he wouldn't have to drink alcohol to overcome it. He only has to drink alcohol to overcome it because he is inhibited against killing. So in other words, he will only kill once he is drunk, he has alcohol in his system. So kind of like building up the courage for it. Park Dietz also noted that Jeffrey strongly identified with the villains of The Exorcist III and Return of the Jedi, particularly the level of power held by these characters. Talking about the significance of these movies on Jeffrey's psyche and many of the murders committed at the Oxford Apartments, Park Dietz explained that Jeffrey occasionally viewed scenes from these films before searching for a victim. He diagnosed Jeffrey Dahmer with substance use disorder, paraphilia, and schizotypical personality disorder. Two court-appointed mental health professionals testifying independently of either prosecution or defense were forensic psychiatrist George Palermo and clinical psychologist Samuel Friedman. Palermo stated that the murders were the result of a pent-up aggression within himself. He killed those men because he wanted to kill the source of his homosexual attraction to them. In killing them, he killed what he hated in himself. Palermo concluded that Jeffrey Dahmer had a severe mixed personality disorder with antisocial, obsessive, compulsive, sadistic, fetishistic, borderline and necrophilic features, but otherwise legally sane. I kind of have to say that it kind of makes sense what Palermo is saying here, that perhaps he hated himself for being gay, and by killing his victims he was trying to kill his side of being gay. It kind of makes sense in a way, because let's not forget that his mother, that his father, his grandmother, they were trying constantly to kind of get him to get a girlfriend and these kind of things. And even though the grandmother, I'm sure that she suspected something, she didn't quite want to believe. Probably as they would be seeing this as embarrassing for their son and grandson, you know, and all the people that they know. So I think that it kind of makes sense. Samuel Friedman testified that it was a longing for companionship that caused Jeffrey Dahmer to kill, and testified that he was not psychotic. He described Jeffrey as amiable, pleasant to be with, courteous, with a sense of humor, conventionally handsome and charming in manner. He was, and still is, a bright young man. He diagnosed Jeffrey Dahmer with a personality disorder not otherwise specified, featuring borderline, obsessive-compulsive and sadistic traits. The trial lasted for 2 weeks. On February 15, 1992, the court heard the verdict. Jeffrey Dahmer was ruled to be sane and not suffering from a mental disorder at the time of each of the 15 murders for which he was tried, although in each count 2 of the 12 jurors signified their disagreement. Formal sentencing was postponed until February 17. On this date, Jeffrey Dahmer's attorney announced his client wished to address the court. Jeffrey Dahmer read from a statement prepared by himself and his defense as he faced the judge. In his statement, Jeffrey emphasized that he never desired freedom following his arrest, and he wished for his own death. He further stressed that none of his murders had been motivated by hatred, that he understood that nothing he either said or did could undo the terrible harm he had caused to the families of his victims and the city of Milwaukee, and that he and his doctors believed his criminal behavior had been motivated by mental disorders. He added that this medical knowledge had given him some peace, and that although he understood that society would never forgive him, he hoped God would. Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced to life imprisonment plus 10 years upon the first 2 counts. The remaining 13 counts carried a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment plus 70 years. The death penalty was not an option for Judge Graham to consider at the penalty phase, as Wisconsin had abolished capital punishment in 1853. He was transferred to the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage to begin his sentence. 3 months after his conviction in Milwaukee, Jeffrey Dahmer was extradited to Ohio to be tried for the murder of his first victim, Stephen Hicks. In a court hearing lasting just 45 minutes, he again pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to a 16th term of life imprisonment on May 1st, 1992. He was transferred to the Columbia Correctional Institution. For the first year of his incarceration, Jeffrey Dahmer was placed in solitary confinement due to concerns for his physical safety should he come into contact with fellow inmates. With his consent, after 1 year in solitary confinement, he was transferred to a less secure unit where he was assigned a 2-hour daily work detail cleaning the toilet block. Shortly after completing his lengthy confessions in 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer had requested to Detective Murphy that he be given a copy of the Bible. This request was granted, and Jeffrey gradually devoted himself to Christianity and became a born-again Christian. On his father's urging, he also read creationist books from the Institute for Creation Research. In May 1994, he was baptized by Roy Radcliffe, a minister in the Church of Christ and a graduate of Oklahoma Christian University, in the prison whirlpool. Following his baptism, Roy Radcliffe visited Jeffrey Dahmer on a weekly basis up until November 1994. They regularly talked about the prospect of death, and Jeffrey questioned whether he was sinning against God by continuing to live. On 3rd of July 1994, an inmate, Osvaldo Dorothy, tried to slash Jeffrey's throat with a razor embedded in a toothbrush as Jeffrey sat in the prison chapel after the weekly church service was finished. Jeffrey, on that occasion, only had superficial wounds. According to Jeffrey's family, he had long been ready to die and accepted any punishment which he might endure in prison. In addition to his father and stepmother maintaining regular contact, Jeffrey's mother, Joyce, also maintained regular contact with her son. Before his arrest, the two didn't see each other since Christmas 1983. Joyce said that in her weekly phone calls, whenever she expressed concerns for her son's physical well-being, Jeffrey responded with comments like, "It doesn't matter, Mom. I don't care if something happens to me." On the morning of November 28, 1994, Jeffrey Dahmer left his cell to conduct his assigned work detail. Accompanying him were 2 other inmates, Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scarver. They were left unsupervised in the shower of the prison gym for around 20 minutes. At approximately 8:10 a.m., Jeffrey Dahmer was discovered on the floor of the bathrooms of the gym, suffering from extreme head wounds. He had been severely bludgeoned on the head and face with a 20-inch, 51-centimeter metal bar. His head was also repeatedly struck against the wall in the assault. Even though Jeffrey was still alive and was rushed to a nearby hospital, he was pronounced dead 1 hour later. Jesse Anderson, the other inmate, had been beaten with the same instrument and died 2 days later from his wounds. Christopher Scarver, who was serving a life sentence for a murder committed in 1990, informed authorities he first attacked Jeffrey with a metal bar as Jeffrey was cleaning a staff locker room before attacking Jesse as he cleaned an inmate locker room. According to Christopher Scarver, Jeffrey didn't yell or make any noise as he was being attacked. Immediately after attacking both men, Christopher Scarver, who was believed to be schizophrenic, returned to his cell and informed a prison guard, quote, "God told me to do it. Jesse Anderson and Jeffrey Dahmer are dead," end of quote. Christopher was adamant he didn't plan the attacks in advance, although he later divulged to investigators he had concealed the 20-inch iron bar used to kill both men in his clothing shortly before the killings. The response of the families of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims was quite mixed. Some celebrated the news, while others were saddened. Catherine Lacey, the mother of victim Oliver Lacey, said, quote, "The hurt is worse now because he's not suffering like we are," end of quote. It is believed that Scarver murdered Dahmer and Anderson, who are both white, because of Dahmer's murder of black males and because Anderson had stabbed his wife to death and attempted to frame 2 black males as the perpetrators of the attack. Scarver was quoted as having said, "Nothing white people do to blacks is just." In September 1995, Dahmer's body was cremated and his ashes divided between his parents. The Oxford apartments at 924 North 25th Street, where Jeffrey Dahmer killed 12 of his victims, were demolished in November 1992. Alternate plans to convert the site into either a memorial garden, a playground, or to reconstruct new housing have failed to materialize. Jeffrey Dahmer's estate was awarded to the families of 11 of his victims who sued for damages. In 1996, Thomas Jacobson, a lawyer representing 8 of the families, announced a planned auction of Dahmer's estate. Although victims' relatives stated the motivation was not greed, the announcement sparked controversy. A civic group, Milwaukee Civic Pride, was quickly established in an effort to raise the funds to purchase and destroy Dahmer's possessions. The group pledged $407,225, including a $100,000 gift by Milwaukee real estate developer Joseph Zilber for purchase of Dahmer's estate. 5 of the 8 families represented by Jacobson agreed to the terms, and Dahmer's possessions were destroyed and buried in an undisclosed Illinois landfill. Now, talking about these possessions and about the auctioning off and then giving the earnings to the victims' families, I just came across today, actually, before recording my first part of this video, I came across a news article saying that apparently because of the Netflix documentary, Jeffrey Dahmer's glasses are being auctioned off on eBay. I believe it was for around $150,000. And a lot of people are saying that, yeah, there will be people who are going to buy these kind of things because, like people were saying on social media, Jeffrey actually saw through the glasses the murder of his own victims and the dismemberment and everything like that, and obviously people are, you know, are kind of like fascinated and they want to have possession of these glasses. Now there is one thing that I'm going to say. One, I didn't really look too much into the article. I just read the headline and bits and pieces in the article. But one, I'm going to say, I don't know how they would be able to verify that these are the authentic glasses of Jeffrey Dahmer, because I don't believe them to be. And second, if these glasses are, let's say, let's just, you know, entertain the possibility that they might be original, which again I'm going to emphasize, I don't believe that they are. Let's say they are being sold on eBay. I do believe that if they are being sold on eBay for $150,000, being that they just came into the media, I'm sure that the legal team of the victims' families will definitely fight to get those monies to be given to the victims' families, because they've done that before, they've done that previously. Like I just mentioned, this charity, they were working and fighting really hard to get a hold of Jeffrey Dahmer's possessions, to destroy them and to award the victims. So yeah, that's why I'm saying, first of all, I don't believe for a second that those are the genuine glasses of Jeffrey Dahmer, because no, I don't think that on his death someone would give these glasses to other one apart from his own family. And then second of all, they would have to be having a certificate of authenticity for them to be sold at such a high price. And yeah, the certificate of authenticity, from my own you know, experience in selling antique and vintage things online, it would have to be proven by way of DNA or something similar that in fact these were Jeffrey Dahmer's glasses. And even if, say for example, there would be a kind of, let's say, a blood drop or something like that on the frame of the glasses, that can actually be kind of planned there just to show people that yes, they are Jeffrey Dahmer's glasses. Because when we are talking about such a high amount of $150,000, we need to think that a lot of people will try to scam other people of this money. So the only way that it can be proven that these are in fact Jeffrey Dahmer's glasses is by way of DNA around the frames, the lenses, and you know, anywhere where you can clearly tell that this is the only way that the DNA can be transferred from Jeffrey Dahmer to the glasses, if you get what I mean. Anyway, moving on. In 1994, Lionel, Jeffrey's father, published a book called The Father's Story and donated a portion of the proceeds from his book to the victims' families. Most of the families showed support for Lionel and Sherry, his wife, Jeffrey's stepmother, although 3 families later sued Lionel. 2 for using their names in the book without obtaining prior consent, and the 3rd family, that of Stephen Hicks, filing a wrongful death suit against Lionel, Sherry, and former wife Joyce, citing parental negligence as the cause for the claim.
What was it, Jeff, that took you over the edge, do you think, and made you take this from the world of fantasy into reality?
From 15 on, I had this reoccurring fantasy of meeting a hitchhiker on the road and of taking him hostage and doing what I wanted with him. About 3 years later, I was 18 years old, driving home. I saw this hitchhiker about a mile from my house. Thought to myself, should I stop and pick him up or should I just keep on going? I wish I just kept on going, but I didn't. I turned around, picked him up, and that's when the nightmare became a reality.
Was there something sexual in the dismembered bodies for you?
As time went on, yes, I did get there was a sexual part to that.
You've read the book.
Right.
He called it a father's story. Pretty simple title.
Right.
Not a simple story, though.
No, not a simple story. Not one that was easy for me to read. But I'm glad he wrote it.
Did it hurt? Was it painful to read?
Yes, it was painful. Some parts of it were, for me, were even fun to read. There were good parts. It wasn't all negative.
Was it emotional for you reading the book?
Yes, it was.
Tell me, what kind of feelings did you have reading it?
Deep regret, sorrow. I guess those were the 2 main emotions.
Is there anything in this book that you strongly disagree with?
Yes, I disagree with the description of me as being so incredibly shy and introverted.
Did you know before you read this book that your dad had his own obsessions and fantasies, that he had thought about, that he had dreamed of committing murder, that he had had an obsession with fire and with explosives?
No, I don't think that's the type of thing one asks one's dad.
Were you surprised to read that about your dad?
Very surprised. Yeah. I didn't know what to think about it. I suppose everyone has their secret thoughts, and so it was somewhat of a shock.
You feel grateful that your father wrote this book? Or do you feel put off by it? I mean, I'm just curious about your overall reaction to it. Do you feel is the book an invasion, do you think? Or is it...
No, I feel nothing but pride for him for writing the book.
Joyce Flint, Jeffrey's mother, died of cancer in November 2000. Prior to her death, she attempted on at least 1 occasion. Dahmer's younger brother David changed his surname and lives in anonymity. Jeffrey Dahmer was adamant that the race of his victims was incidental to him and that he was the body form of a potential victim that attracted his attention. These have been supported via an independent forensic specialist study of Dahmer's victim selection, the anthropological analysis of which revealed his victims shared a morphological similarity and suggesting Jeffrey Dahmer was psychologically attracted to a certain anthropometric body type. So Jeffrey Dahmer was not attracted to the outside of the victims but rather the internal organs. So he had a sexual fantasy around the internal organs of the victims, which before doing my research into Jeffrey Dahmer, I had no idea that this was a thing. I had no idea that you can actually have sexual fantasies around internal organs of others, which is completely disgusting. Lastly, what I want to do is I want to separate fact and fiction. from the Netflix series. If you have seen it, you will be quite surprised. But I can't talk about Jeffrey Dahmer and the Netflix series without me pointing out facts from fiction, because I see constantly on social media people talking and saying about Jeffrey Dahmer, and they reference only this documentary. And a lot of people, I don't think that they realize that this series is based on the true story of Jeffrey Dahmer. However, it's not like a documentary type of series where you have only the facts being told. You have series which is based on true facts, but you also have a series which is also fiction, apart from facts. So, first of all, Glenda Cleveland, portrayed as Dahmer's next-door neighbor at the Oxford Apartments on 25th Street. Throughout the series, she's seen repeatedly attempting to try and warn local law enforcement about the activities inside apartment 213. Okay, so while Glenda Cleveland did actually exist, the real person lived in a building which was adjacent to Dahmer's and not in the apartment next door as depicted in the series. In the series, this is a composite character combining the real-life Glenda Cleveland with Dahmer's real next-door neighbor called Pamela Bass. Pamela Bass did catch on to what Dahmer was up to, hearing screams and the sounds of sawing and bones breaking in the night while smelling the awful stench of putrefying flesh. That smell filled the entire apartment building, leading to it being razed and its tenants displaced shortly after Dahmer finally went to prison. Glenda Cleveland, who lived in the building next door, did observe the 1991 final and most horribly prolific year of killings incidents involving the 14-year-old Conrad, in which he tried to escape Dahmer's apartment, dazed and drugged, and was sent back by police. He was in fact Glenda Cleveland, the neighbor from the next building, who actually called the police. Along with her, I think it was the other neighbors in the apartment block, and also I believe it was her daughter, but I'm not sure of that. What is not true in the show is that, as shown in the final episode, officers Balzarak and Gabrish, they never received an Officer of the Year award in reality. Thanks to Glenda Cleveland's efforts, along with the Reverend Jesse Jackson, they were suspended after the Conrad's murder, but they were reinstated to their jobs in 1994. However, they never received an Officer of the Year award as portrayed in the series. Judge William Gardner went on to receive a lot of criticism following Dahmer's final arrest for the leniency of the molestation sentence. Now, again, I'm going to say that yes, I do criticize him, because if he would have given Jeffrey at that time a higher sentence for the molestation charges, then Jeffrey wouldn't have been out to commit the following murders that he did. This is what I'm going to say. So in the show, the judge is painted negatively in a moment where he appears not to understand sound tones, Syntasoms, broken English, but Anne Schwartz's book Monster, the True Story of the Jeffrey Dahmer Murders indicates that the Syntasoms family wasn't present for the 1988 sentencing. In the Netflix show, Dahmer is shown more or less courting the 31-year-old deaf man Tony Hughes throughout 1991 in Milwaukee, first meeting him at a gay bar and then continuing to see him seemingly having real feelings and even a tenderness for Tony Hughes. In reality, Dahmer knew Tony Hughes as early as 1989, according to a friend of Tony's. In his confession, Dahmer said that he never met Tony before the night that he was murdered. Tony's friend, however, said that Dahmer came looking for Tony several times over the years leading up to his murder. Tony's disappearance was reported in the paper before it came out in the confessions that Dahmer had killed him. The last episode of the Netflix series is Dahmer's trial. It's also the most controversial moment from the show, as it recreates word for word actual testimony from the trial, especially at a key moment where loved ones of the victims were allowed to speak on the stand and address Dahmer directly. That includes a scene with the rage-filled Rita Isbell, the sister of one of Dahmer's final victims, Errol Lindsay. That really did happen in real life, and it's a reenactment word by word and action by action that's proved most upsetting for Errol's cousin, who on Twitter questioned, why do we need yet another Dahmer retelling at all?
The oldest sister of Errol Lindsay, whatever your name is, Satan, I'm mad. This is how you act when you are out of control. I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I hate you. I hate you. This is out of control. Don't fuck Jeffrey. I kill you. God damn it. Look at me, motherfucker. I kill you. Let me kill you.
The murders are a matter of public record, and so the production was not required to ask permission for or to even inform the families about the series. And I am really hoping that with this I managed to bring to you all of the facts and to kind of separate the facts and the fiction from the Dahmer Netflix series, because like I said, I was really disturbed by all of the comments that I've seen lately on social media, thinking about Jeffrey Dahmer just as he was in the Netflix series. However, I'm going to say that a lot of things in the series are fiction, and also a lot of things which Jeffrey Dahmer did in reality are not even shown in the series or being mentioned or talked about, which includes but is not limited to the fact that some of Jeffrey's victim skulls were painted and also enameled. So again, I'm going to say, if you are going to watch the Netflix documentary on Jeffrey Dahmer, please do keep an open mind that there are facts in the documentary or series mixed with fiction, and you really do have to do your own research and look in depth into Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes before you decide that everything that you see in the documentary is true, or before you decide that apart from whatever is shown in the documentary there's nothing more to it, right? So this is what I'm trying to get at. And now the last thing that I'm going to say is that my heart really goes out to all of the victims' families, especially at this moment where Jeffrey Dahmer's story and ultimately and most importantly the story of his victims are being brought back into the public eye and into the media. And I feel like again we got to the stage where we are glamorizing yet another serial killer, where in fact we should be bringing awareness to the victims in these cases, but rather everyone is talking about Jeffrey Dahmer on social media, and I'm seeing article after article after article, news articles, press articles around Jeffrey Dahmer, and mostly only around Jeffrey Dahmer and his documentary and what people believe of him and what people believe of the documentary, but there is barely any mention of any of the victims. So that's why my series is in 2 parts, because I wanted to make sure that I include all of the information I have on all of the victims and to make sure that I bring awareness to the victims rather than to just Jeffrey Dahmer, because in my honest opinion I do believe that the Netflix series, it is glamorizing Jeffrey Dahmer and a horrific serial killer. So please do let me know, guys, what do you think in the comment section down below, and also let me know if you have watched the Netflix series and what's your opinion on the series, and do you feel like I feel that we are kind of glamorizing a serial killer when in fact we shouldn't be doing that, and we should instead highlighting the victims in this case and also bringing awareness to the victims, because in the end there were people's lives being lost, regardless of the fact that they came from a poor neighborhood or that they were black, but especially because they were black. I feel like a lot of these things are not being brought forward into the media, specifically for the reason that the victims, most of them, were black. So yeah, please again do let me know what do you think in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!